Hello! Today on Warp Plastic, I'd like to talk about Milliput Epoxy Putty. But before I begin, I just want to assure everyone that I am in no way paid to endorse this product. I'm just a big fan and I've used it for many years. However, if the kind and benevolent folks at Milliput would like to send me money to say nice things about their product, well, I'm all ears. But as anyone who knows me will attest, I am the last person who would ever indulge in gratuitous brand placement in a lame attempt to get a lucrative product endorsement deal. Oh, sir, that's just not me. Oh, excuse me. Just got to adjust the camera a little bit here. There we go. Oh, yeah, that's better. Milliput is a two-part epoxy putty. Now, of course, there are many epoxy putties on the market. I'm sure most or all of them are very good. But Milliput is the only one I've ever actually used myself. And as I say, I've used it for many years and I really like it. One of the things I do like about it is that it's water soluble. So it's environmentally friendly. That's right. Use Milliput and save the planet. Milliput apparently has many household uses. You can fix radiators with it in your home or your car. You can fix leaky pipes with it or rain gutters. It will set underwater apparently, so if you're in the middle of the ocean and your boat is sinking, maybe you could fix the hole with that. And in fact, if you read their website, there is actually a testimonial from a guy who did just that, fixed a hole in his boat while it was sinking. Anyway, it's also temperature resistant up to 130 degrees, which makes it very useful for making soldering jigs, which is one of the things I use it for. It's an electrical insulator, so that's another use for it. Perhaps not in modeling, but who knows, possibly. And it is, obviously, it's self-hardening because it's a two-part epoxy putty. It doesn't need air to harden. And it takes about 3 hours to set, or begin to set anyway. And it's kneadable like a putty until then, and it's very workable. Once it sets, it's rock hard. You can drill it, file it, sand it, do whatever you like to it. It's good for filling large gaps, and it will actually take a good scribed line, unlike a lot of putties that will chip or crack. So if you got a big gap in your model that you just can't get rid of, it is useful. And in fact, I used it, here we are, right here. The F-16 again. The wing roots of this look like the plastic had actually shrunk in the mold, so they touched in the front and the back of the wing. But in the middle here, there was some huge gaps, and I used epoxy putty for that. I used Milliput, and it works really well. And because it also bonds to the plastic, it adds strength, unlike regular modeling putties. So useful for that. Yeah, that's what I use it for. Milliput comes in 5 flavors. There's the standard yellow-gray, there's silver-gray, white, black, and terracotta. The latter, I'm guessing, is good for repairing plant pots if you're in the habit of breaking them. The only 2 I've actually used is the standard yellow-gray, yes, standard, and the superfine white. This is really good for repairing ceramics because it's the same color. But today, I'm just going to be talking about this one. The procedure, I imagine, is the same for all 5. As I say, I've only used 2 out of the 5, but I'm guessing you would do the same technique for all 5 of them. So today, we're just going to be demonstrating with this one. So we open up the box, and what have we got? We've got 2 sticks of, well, one's resin and one's hardener, and I'm not sure which is which. I think this is the hardener, the gray, but I could be wrong. This could be the hardener, but I don't think so. It doesn't really matter. You use equal parts of both of these. Mix them together. You also get some instructions, gives you a little more detailed care and use of the stuff. So one thing you will notice with Milliput, and I don't know if this is the same for all epoxy putties, but I'm just going to demonstrate here, is that there is quite a hard layer on the outside of this. And it doesn't matter, even if you get this stuff brand new, I find that layer is there. That will not blend in, so you have to remove that. And what I do is I just cut a slice off, and then I just trim the hardened layer off the outside of it to get rid of that, because otherwise you just end up with chunks of that in there. It just will not mix in. And to a lesser extent, the same as the other one as well. You get a bit of a hard layer on that too, so that also needs to be removed. But by doing that as well, you also ensure that you're going to get equal parts of both. So that's the number one step, and we'll go ahead and do that just right now. This is my setup for working with Milliput. So I'm just using an old piece of plexiglass here. Food container full of water. That's for keeping my tools and my fingers wet. Oh, and I would recommend wearing gloves of some kind, because this can be an irritant like most epoxies if you use it over time. If you have a sensitive type of skin, it could cause you problems. So better safe than sorry. Wear some gloves. And if you must, wear black nitrile, but just don't show them to me because they creep me out. Okay, so I use a hobby knife with just an old blade in it for cutting out my Milliput. Stir stick, and again, I'm going to keep these wet, dipping them in there so that the Milliput won't stick to your tools. Because that is one thing that you might find a little bit frustrating at first, is that it'll stick where you don't want it to and not stick where you do want it to. So today I'm going to be demonstrating on a Combat Models Shorts Belfast, which is a bit of a huge beast. And it is a resin model, but the techniques are the same no matter what material you're working with, whether it's styrene or cast metal or resin, same techniques. So the fit of this leaves a lot to be desired in parts. And we can see it, especially here on the tail, there is a bit of a gap and a bit of a step there as well. So I'm going to be using Milliput to fair that in. So we'll get to that in a second. Now, I've got my two slices here, and you can really see on this, which I think is the hardener, but you can really see that skin around the outside edge. That's quite hard. That needs to come off because that will not blend in, as I said. So I just take my knife and I just trim that stuff off of there. Kind of like peeling a potato, just like that. All the way around, get that out. Okay, it's a bit, oh, get some more water on there. I did actually cut pieces that were too small at first, so that's why I've got two bits stuck together here, as I decided to use the Belfast, and it will require a fair amount of Milliput to blend that step in. It's probably not critical if you get every last speck of this stuff off, but the more the merrier. I figured, there we go. That's more or less got it. And then the same with the resin, or what I think is resin. Try not to put a hole in your gloves like I probably just did. The resin, if this is, I'm going to call this resin. I don't really know if it is the resin, but I'm going to call that resin and that hardener. If anybody knows for sure and they'd like to tell me in the comments, I would appreciate that. So this stuff is kind of crumbly until you get some water on it. And I think my gloves are a little bit too big for my fingers here. Hey, I got them free. I'm not complaining. Okay, let's get rid of that mess. Here we go. That out. Okay, so I got my two pieces that are more or less roughly the same size. I don't think they have to be exact, but as long as they're pretty close, that'll do. So what we do now is we start kneading these together, and in the instructions they recommend a minimum of 5 minutes, which is probably be about right. I think it's about what I do. And basically you want to blend those. Just get some water in here. You want to blend these together until they're one uniform color with no streaks in there. What I do is I just squish them together like that, and then just keep folding it over. And as I say, that one is a little bit crumbly. So we'll get some more water in there. That'll start to soften up the more you need it. And actually, this one I'm using here is a little bit old, so it's probably more crumbly than a newer pack would be. Yeah. And that's the other advantage of using gloves, is that you don't get this stuff all over your fingers, because it's kind of icky. All right. Okay, I'm not going to show you the entire 5 minutes of me kneading this together because I think you get the idea with the first 30 seconds of it. So we'll just cut out here and I'll come back in a minute. Okay, so there we are. I got that pretty uniform in color. So basically what it is, I just kept kneading it, adding it a little bit more water at a time. Got it nice and soft. And once there was no streaks in it, I gave it another minute of kneading just to make sure. And there we go. That's our lump of Milliput. Just sticking to my gloves. Some water on there. Okay, so that's that. Now, one thing is, because I'm not just filling a gap here, I'm actually filling a little bit of a step right there. So what I'm going to do is, using my riffler file, I'm just going to rough up the surface of the resin so that the Milliput will have something to grip to, or it'll grip a little better anyway. What I would do with this with plastic as well, actually, not just because it's resin. You can use sandpaper for this if you want, or whatever method you prefer. But yeah, just rough it up a little bit, and it gives it a bit of tooth to grip onto. There we go. Okay, so basically now we just start taking off little chunks of Milliput and smearing them into the joint. Make sure you press it in there quite firmly so it gets right into the joint, and then smear it around there, and make sure you keep your gloves wet so it won't stick to them, because trust me, that gets very frustrating very quickly. And of course, this would be a lot easier too if you have gloves that actually fit you, unlike me. Do as I say, not as I do. So yeah, and that is the essential process, and we just carry on and do that right way around the joint. And an interesting little tidbit of information that I read on the Milliput website, and I've never actually tried this myself, but apparently at this stage, while it's still workable like this, if you put it in the freezer for an indefinite period of time, when you take it out and thaw it, it will still be workable, which is quite handy. If you get interrupted, that means you won't have wasted that big lump of Milliput. You can still use it at a later date. And I guess that makes sense because, like most epoxies, Milliput produces heat as it cures, known as an exothermic reaction. And I guess if you take away that heat, you will either stop or at least slow down the chemical reaction. But yeah, good thing to know. Worthwhile trying sometime. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, we just carry on doing this, smeared it in there. And again, keep your gloves wet so it doesn't stick. And then once I've done that, and I've got it all the way around my joint, I will use my moistened stir stick and just sort of smooth it out as much as I can, and get it as level as I can. That way, that sort of reduces the amount of filing and sanding you have to do later once it's set. And then, yeah, it takes, according to the instructions, about 3 to 4 hours to set. I found, yeah, about 3 hours is about right. And then a further 3 hours after that to cure fully. And then it's rock hard. And then you can work it, you can file it, sand it, drill it, jump up and down on it, whatever you like. And there we go. So, as usual, I have overestimated the amount of Milliput I need for this top joint. But that's okay, because there are plenty of more bad joints on this model that I can use the rest of that Milliput on. Alrighty, I've let this cure overnight, and it is, as you can see, nice and rock hard, ready to be filed and sanded down. And as I mentioned previously, I overestimated the amount of Milliput that I'm going to need, which is pretty much par for the course with me. So instead of just doing the top joint as I had originally planned, I ended up doing the whole freaking thing just to use that ball of Milliput up, but that's okay. So I am going to be using a coarse sanding drum in my Dremel to take care of that, because it will take quite a while to file and sand it by hand, and I'm kind of lazy and want to get her done. But do be aware, however, when you're dry sanding this or filing it or whatever, do wear a mask. Same goes for resin, because breathing in sanding dust is not terribly healthy. Wet sanding, not an issue, but definitely using a sanding drum and a Dremel, that's going to create a lot of dust. So do wear a mask. Let's be safe out there. And there we have it. That's the result of a few more minutes of wet sanding using sanding block and starting with 320 grit sandpaper and then 400 grit used wet. Obviously, it needs a little bit more work still, some minor imperfections filled in, but I've rescribed the cargo bay hatch, which worked very well in the Milliput. And for wet sanding, I use a piece of semi-rigid foam. It's got a bit of give to it, but it's quite rigid, so it makes a great sanding block. No idea where I got that. I think it was packaging from a light fitting or something, but pretty useful. And by the way, don't be put off by the joints in this Combat Kits Belfast. It is an excellent model. It really is. And the only game in town if you want a 72nd scale Belfast. But it is the former Magna Models kit. Combat purchased all the original masters from Magna when he retired. And they have been slowly re-releasing them with updated molding and improved white metal parts and decals. So do check them out. And I'm in the process of finishing off the decal artwork for Combat for the Heavy Lift Belfast. So that will be available eventually once I finish that off and we get the decals printed. So do check them out. They were available from Freight Dog Models in the UK, although Colin is only showing the Max Broussard kit at the moment, but hopefully he will be restocking the range from Dave at Combat Kits. And I'll put a link into Freight Dog in the description. Do check them out. Excellent. And quite heavy. You could probably kill somebody with this, so yeah, be careful. A couple of other things I made from Milliput. This is a soldering jig for the cabin, or cabin. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. The middle struts on a Fokker triplane in 72nd scale. And so basically what I did was I took the kit part, squished it into a lump of Milliput, and once that's set, because it's quite heat proof, I can use that to make any number of new struts from brass. Just solder them together, using that as a jig. Very handy. The other thing I made was, hang on there. This was before I got my Mattel vacuformer. See previous video. This is a two-part mold I made for the exhaust channel on a 72nd scale salt with camel. So basically I just made a little master from wood, squished that into a lump of Milliput, and then I had a male-female mold, and I just stuck some heated plastic in there, squished it together, and came up with that little piece for the underside exhaust channel. Pretty handy. So there we go. That is Milliput. Do check it out. Try it out. Don't be scared. It's Milliput. Milliput, the water-soluble, environmentally friendly two-part epoxy putty. Use Milliput and save the planet. Use as directed. Results may vary. Use of Milliput alone may not actually save the planet. If in doubt, consult an environmentalist or Greta Thunberg, if she's not in jail.